Well, this is like a special treat for me because I have come to the place that has my family history back quadrillions of years. But we're also sitting here with a living legend. We're talking here to Long River. That translation is, or I'm sorry, the pronunciation in Indian is
Gayuhis.
And your English name would be
John Fadden.
And your dad was
Ray Fadden.
Ray Fadden,
also known as Superman.
Yes, or better, or stronger than Superman, especially in the Iroquois Nation. And we're here today, and I just had a few questions for you, if you don't mind, John. In your time here on Mother Earth, what lessons has she taught you?
Well, one thing was just to do my best to follow in the footsteps of my father. But myself, my wife, my sons, together can equal the amount of work that he did. And it was 61 seasons ago that this museum that we're in was started by him. And he had, since his youth, collected many things, arrowheads and so forth, and he learned to do beadwork. And then in that time period of his life, he produced a ton of beadwork and also did a tremendous amount of research. And if you could pan around this room, you'd see various charts, educational charts that have elements of the Iroquois and other history of other native nations as well. But he did all this work, and in particular over on that wall there are some panels that have hand lettering that he did. He did the research as well as the hand lettering.
He did millions of words in hand lettering.
For sure. And our museum has over 300 items within it, artifacts and so forth, from the smallest thing might be an arrowhead to the largest is we have two Maniwaki Algonquin birch bark canoes. And we have a dugout canoe that was found in the Adirondacks in Lake Placid some years back in the late 50s. And then some of the other things reflect the history. And some of it is like history often can be told in legend and stories. And we have a number of beaded belts that my father produced over the years. And some of them, like I'm viewing one right now up there. It's a yellow belt and it's produced with seed beads, small seed beads. And at either end of the belt you see a black bear. And what that represents is the Bear Clan. And a particular story that are reflected by the pictographic images tells a story of how the Bear Clan learned about medicine. And in respect to an old fellow that entered a village, and the Bear Clan people helped him, and he taught them many different medicinal plants and how to prepare them.
Now,
so that tells that story.
Now, I hope to get a guided tour of this museum and also showcase it here on the series. Another question I had for you, what has been your favorite accomplishment in life thus far?
Well, I don't think I've done it yet. So
I don't know. You're hitting awfully lightly on your artwork because your artwork is just unbelievably incredible.
Well, I was going to segue into the comment about my art. But I went to school. I was always drawing since I was a kid. I went to college and I became an art teacher and I taught art for 32 years. And in that time period I also illustrated a number of books. Or at least there's about 80-some books that has my art in it, reflected in it. Plus I've done paintings exhibited here and there and so forth. And some of these charts and panels that I mentioned that my father produced years ago, they have graphics, and the graphics on some of them were done when I was a kid. I was like 13 years old. He would do the research, he would do the hand lettering, and then I would do the drawings. One year, there was another fellow that lived with us, a young fellow. He was a year younger than me. He was William or Bill Loran, and he's from Akwesasne, Wolf Clan, and he also enjoyed art. And so Bill and I were drafted to produce the graphics for these various charts that were produced during that 1 year.
I can't wait to show them to you.
Yeah.
These next questions are optional. What has been the best moment of your life?
I would say that moment occurred 50 years ago, and that was when I married Elizabeth Eva Thompson, and she became my wife. And that was the most intelligent thing I ever did, was to marry her. We've got 3 kids and a wonderful life.
And she's still with us. In fact, we're
Yes,
probably
she
in
is.
trouble for not for holding you up from going to town.
We were going to go to town today, but I can pass on that.
Now, this is optional. What has been the worst moment of your life?
Emotionally, was back in the late 80s, 1980s, that I and others worked on a curriculum guide with the State Education Department of New York. And in that process, we produced a draft of a document that would go to all the schools within New York State, and it would deal with Iroquois, in particular, history of the Six Nations. And the first sentence of that document was that this curriculum guide, is written from the point of view of Native Americans. And it went on for those, I think it's like 600 or 700 pages. Then after we produced the draft, then it went to various other people for review, critique. And it went to educators throughout the state and other states too. And also went to Native leaders within the Iroquois system. And then also went to certain academics. And the idea was that we would get response from those people and to further improve the guide. But what occurred, and what was a huge disappointment, was when the certain academics within the State University of New York system basically called us liars. That the things that we wrote were inaccurate, and that it was political hyperbole, I think it was one of the terms I recall. And they, some of them thought that this review would be like what's called a peer review. And with a peer review, you get this criticism, but you never find out who actually said it. You know, the interviewers would never be personally addressed. But it wasn't that way. The guide director, Mary, she let us know what these people said about us. And anyway, it became a controversial thing at that point. And the result of it, and which was the greatest disappointment in my life, was that this was never produced. It was a horrible circumstance for me.
How much time did you end up spending getting it to that point?
It started in the late 80s, and this whole thing evolved into the early 90s.
All for nothing.
And I took good notes of the whole thing, and I've shared that with certain people who were interested. I just sent them a copy of the thing, and then the most effective use of it, in my view, was that there's a young fellow named Brian Broadrose, and his mother is Seneca, and he just got his PhD out of SUNY, I forget which one it was, but the downstate, and ultimately it'll become a book. But his thesis involved a chapter about this occurrence and experience with the curriculum guide, and he also takes each of the ones who were basically very critical to us, and there were 5 of them in number. And he not only took my notes, but did other research and other expressions and activities that they did to show where they're coming from. And my sense of it is that their primary interest is to become the authorities on the Indians, and that what do the Indians know, about themselves? They know nothing, according to them. And we just simply don't agree with some of the things, or some of their conclusions. But anyway, those people destroyed the curriculum guide, and that was one of the biggest disappointments of my life, was that fact. Because if that had been produced, that would have gone to every school in New York State and beyond, and would help educate non-natives as well as natives about their own history and culture and so forth.
Dang. Now, I've come a long way and waited impatiently to ask you this following question. How do you feel about being native?
I'm quite pleased with it. It's people with a long, millennia-long tenure on this country, and we're part of this earth. and in spite of intrusions and all of the negative things that have occurred subsequent to 1492, are still here and still producing good things, producing art, producing gatherings. Like just recently at Akwesasne, there was a telling of the epic story of when the Confederacy was formed.
I went there.
And you went to it.
Yeah.
There were many people that listened to it and heard those good words, and they're still here. I mean, that's, and again, back to our museum, if you're in this second room and you look up at the edge of the ceiling, you see this long pictographic belt, and that was produced by my father, and it tells that story of the epic story when the Confederacy was formed. And that's you know, like all cultures, they have stories of epic quality, and that's one of them, and it's right from this country, and it's something to be very proud of.
I'm going to look forward to that in a guided tour. One more question, if you don't mind. In your opinion, where do we go from here?
Well, you just have to continue with what has occurred with that in your mind, and to continue to produce things, to do things that will enhance this wonderful legacy that we have. And that may take different forms too, you know, as well as the different people have different views as to how that should occur. But what should be done is work in tandem together for the positive ends for all of our grandchildren and beyond, you know, for sure.
I cannot thank you enough for this interview.
I just got started.
Well, I hope to continue. I have limited space to edit each one, so thank you.
You're welcome. Yo.